Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this Leeds Alumni Voices session. I'd like to welcome all alumni, all current students, all staff, and anyone else that's tuned in. I understand we have people from 34 different countries, so it's absolutely wonderful and marvellous that we have so many people gathered today. I would like to introduce you to Rupa, and a Leeds alumni, and very shortly here. Thank you.
Okay, hi, hello everyone. So lovely to be here today. Thank you so very much for having me. And it's absolutely amazing to hear that there's so many people out there from 34 different countries. I'm absolutely amazed. So thanks so very much. And I think the topic that we are all going to discuss today is about something that's very close to my heart, and I suspect it is to all your hearts as well, which is why we're probably here this evening or afternoon or morning, as it might be for you. So before I actually start with the presentation, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself and give you a little bit of information about who I am and sort of my journey and actually my time at Leeds. So in fact, I was 17 when I started I had sort of started with my passion for textiles. And I guess for me, it's been always colors and textiles and fabrics have always been something very close to my heart. With an opportunity to be at Leeds, which happened to be my master's program in textiles management, which was then the school for textiles, which then became School for Design. And I was really fortunate to start my, sort of take my passion forward and study both international trade and textiles, which in fact laid very much the foundations for pretty much everything I've done for the next almost 20 years of my life. So, well, going forward, I think the first thing we're going to do is actually take you on to a little film that we have that we've put together, which has very much to do with sustainability, but also a lot to do with a lot of the younger generation as well. So I'm going to leave you with the film for now first. My name is Rupa and I'm the CEO of InclusiveTrade.com. First and foremost, what is inclusive trade and why is it even important today? Have you spoken to any of the Gen Z customers today? Do you know what they want and what's important for them?
Transparency is really important when buying from a new brand, so it makes me feel like I can trust them more.
Consumer demand alone and what a consumer purchases on an individual level will not do anything if decision makers aren't brave enough to make decisions that are beneficial to the earth and its communities.
I'm Emma Dick and I'm a senior lecturer in fashion at Middlesex University in London, and I'm a director of Inclusive Trade.
Working with Inclusive Trade, I think they have the same values, and I think they'll promote brands like ourselves, give us a really good platform to showcase everything that we stand for, and we're really excited about that.
Whether I'm likely to buy a product often starts with how I feel about the brand and their ethics. So whether they try to be sustainable, environmentally conscious, how they pay their workers, and if they try and avoid exploitation.
I think this whole cycle is really negative and has a huge impact on the environment, and that's something that really doesn't sit well with me and a lot of other young consumers.
Hasbe is a brand that helps preserve tradition and cultural heritage, giving these vintage textiles a new life.
Mass production has changed this, and today there's a greater lack of value for the things that we own.
When I'm considering buying something, I'm vegan. I became vegan about 3 or 4 years ago.
I'm very supportive of thrifting, resold clothes, and vintage items of brands that place an emphasis on reducing wastage and carbon footprint.
And after a massive hurricane, my favorite yoga practice place on the beach was covered in plastic waste. And this is when the idea of Yoga Cycle was born.
I strongly believe that the way forward is to start with ourselves and to make a difference one household at a time.
Some of the challenges that we face while running our business include educating the customer about our product and why they should spend more to make the switch to a natural product. And the other one is greenwashing, where companies claim to use natural, high-quality ingredients, which they indeed do not.
Just invest more in the cotton industry to increase value. Value addition on the continent is really important. Keep the value there, increase GDP, and let's see change in Africa. This is what I love to see.
Cash flow is so important, and the fact that just having a good annual turnover or having enough money, making enough revenues is just not enough.
Inclusive trade is really invaluable for me to get the message out there because it's a platform that totally syncs with my beliefs.
If you are hearing this video, keep in mind what we are thinking about, what the climate change strikes are all about, what is the actual issues driving us and our generation is facing. I think that's very important to have a listen and think deeply as to whether or not the products we are creating is actually aggravating the problem or solving the problem.
So that was a little introductory video, which we in fact launched and showcased at the UN last year in October. And as you can see, there's so many different issues going on around the world. And obviously the COVID situation is, after all of this has already been so important, the climate change action and social impact, that's all been so extremely important. And now on top of it all, we're looking at a new, totally different planet where we're trying to relearn everything that we've ever known, and we're almost being forced to change our ways, which I think is in some ways an interesting discussion to be had, and to think about what we can actually do to make change really happen and make it happen in a way that will hopefully not repeat certain things that have happened in the past. So with that, let's see. If we were to actually think about what was really, really important to all of us, I guess when we think about fashion, sustainability, and we think about the industry, or we think about our own consumption patterns, it's hard to today say that, just stop consuming. That'd be brilliant. But actually, I guess that is something that is quite hard for the masses. We can't actually say it's just stop buying, stop consuming. But I guess what I'd like to think about then is that if we did buy something, and anything that we bought, what if that generated positive impact? And what if that actually was something that you and I, sitting in our own spaces, sitting in our own places, were able to do and make change happen in that format? So at this point, I think what we want to do before I go further is that I think we're going to have a little poll, and I believe the lovely lady at Leeds is going to bring it up. So what you need to do is basically click on what you think sustainability means for you. Just click on the topic that you think is closest to your heart. And we're very soon going to be able to see what the poll shows. So that would be a great starting point to actually get a feel for what really makes most of you tick. So I'll give you a few seconds really, because I don't think you need very long. Yep. Do we have some of the polls in? Okay, so we've had a lot of people talking about environmental impact, responsible consumption. Whoops, what happened there? social impact, gender inclusivity. Okay, so I can see that a lot of people really feel very strongly about environmental impact. That's actually 94, so that's 75%. Responsible consumption, another 72%, that's brilliant. Then we've got social impact coming in quite closely over there at 41%. And then recycling. So actually, between responsible consumption, environmental impact, ethical trade. Okay, is there some more coming in? I think that's it. Right, I think we've got the majority of people who've already given us responses. So that's really interesting to see, because in fact, a lot of the stuff that you've actually mentioned here, we're gonna actually see how you could potentially have an impact, and a positive one, by making some decisions, some simple decisions at your end, and how that might actually impact the issues or the causes that you are very passionate about. So one of the things, I guess, that is super important is that, you know, there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of conversation out there, and what I'd like to call an ethical minefield almost, because actually every single day we hear this is conscious, this is organic, this is recycled. But quite often it's really hard to think about the choices we make. Are they truly, or are they really having a positive impact? And I guess for me, as a starting point, the reason why inclusive trade was even born was largely because of the work that I did in the field for the last 20 years, which is to do with, you know, working on the field with artisans, but also manufacturers across the fashion and textiles industry. And I think the thing that really, really hit me the most was that the lack of transparency or visibility was something that I thought was one of the core reasons why people aren't able to make the decisions that they might otherwise make. So, for example, this lovely lady, this beautiful smiling lady over there in the picture over there, is in fact from one of our projects back in Guatemala, and they grow brown. It's brown cotton. It's not colored. It's not dyed. It's just organically grown, and it is brown to start with. Now, the whole kind of process behind it and the products that they come out with at the end are so gorgeous, and they support an entire community as well as farmers in the region. Now, if that's something that we actually knew that was being done in such an amazing way, and the sort of time and effort that was going into it, I'm almost certain that many of us over here, at least the ones, of course, I mean, we're here today because we believe in sustainability and we want to do something about it. Many of us, I believe, would be able to choose or make a choice over other things that we might find as the cheapest option. So it simply goes down to the fact that how do you know that what you're buying or something that you're consuming, that whether it really does have positive impact, because of the lack of visibility to a large extent. So to take it to the next level, we would want to ask 3 questions, really simple questions that I want to sort of look at, because obviously we don't have an entire day to talk about this, although I probably could. We're going to just start with some, you know, simple questions. And first and foremost, I mean, this is what I asked myself as well in terms of when we set up inclusive trade, which was very much about bringing the product and the stories and the amazing things that are happening out there to consumers internationally, but at the same time using technology, bringing sort of what is out here today with the technology and the technical advances, but at the same time going back to the roots and bringing tradition to the forefront. So it's very much about sort of marrying the 2 concepts. And for me, I guess the 3 questions that we asked ourselves and the team together were, what is the impact? What is sustainability? And at the end of the day, what can I do, or what can we do as a community? So I guess those are sort of the 3 areas that we might touch upon today. And I'd love you to think about them as you sort of continue through the presentation today. And at the end, we will have time for question and answers. So I'm very happy to have your questions at the end of the presentation as well. So first and foremost, when we talk about impact, let me take you through a little journey of the company called Inclusive Trade that we've set up and what it means to us. Because at the end of the day, impact can mean a lot of different things. And I was actually looking up some definitions a little while back. And it's interesting to see how impact, effect, influence, a lot of things are sort of correlated. And I think, you know, one could write a PhD on that in itself. But impact is quite often seen to be an influencing thing as compared to an effect, which is pretty much a consequence of any particular action. So I guess what we're trying to do over here is to have an influence which would hopefully lead to a better consequence. I know if that makes sense. I know it's 6 p.m. in the evening, but I'm sure we can kind of get through that. So again, going through that, what did it mean to us? So the thing is that when it's so wide and it's so big out there, you have to sort of narrow it down and think about it from a perspective of what does it mean? Because if you don't know what it means to you, then it's very difficult to actually go ahead and solve for it. So it's pretty much about defining it, and then you can always increase the definition and grow with it and add more variables and more issues to the equation. But let's say with what was impact for us, and then how did we see sustainability, and then what did we do about it? Okay, so hopefully this will take you through a little bit about how we went about it. So inclusive trade, what did we do? We basically said that it's a platform indeed. It is something that sustainability is the core focus of it, and ethical trade is the core focus of it. But it's such a large element. So let's narrow it down to areas that we're truly passionate about and truly can make a difference, because we know those areas better than others. And then, of course, along the way, we're going to teach ourselves and hopefully collaborate and have more partners and be able to, have an impact on many more areas. So it is a platform for brands who are effectively passionate about 3 areas, really: gender, environment, and social impact. And I was really interested to see that all those 3 things that we're talking about here today are actually areas that at the very beginning of the poll, we found were of interest to many of you out there. So I don't know if everyone here is familiar with the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals, that have been set out by the United Nations. They basically, this was preceded by the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, which was basically about, reducing poverty, increasing trade, and lots of different elements. And then the new set of goals that were set up, which are now the sort of pathway, if you like, the trajectory is 2030. So we've got about 10 years left to go on this. And there are 17 of them that the UN has set up. And I'm not sure if people have seen these or are familiar with them, but they do actually go into pretty much every aspect of our lives and of our communities and of the environment. So as you can see, when you go from 1 to 17, you've got everything right from no poverty to education, to gender, to clean water. So there's something in there that you're probably going to be you'd find quite close to your heart and that you'd be passionate about. Now, for us, effectively, we decided to select some areas. I mean, prior to inclusive trade, as I have mentioned, and some of you might have read my profile in the past, I used to work at the UN, and I've also worked on several trade and development projects with governmental agencies and corporates. And a large amount of that I was very passionate about was focused on seriously looking at how women or gender in general could be made more inclusive, and how could we support inclusivity that would then lead to more empowerment in terms of cross-border trade, in terms of trying to send more children to school, and there's so many other knock-on effects and all of that. So actually gender equality and lack of discrimination is something that I have been passionate about for many years. And prior to inclusive trade, we actually had a network, a non-profit organization that kind of preceded inclusive trade, called Spinner Circle, focused on women in the textiles industry and how they could interact with each other and support each other, which then in fact grew on. And of course, inclusive trade is a platform. It's an e-commerce technology-based platform. So gender equality is an area, and a large majority of our small brands and artisans from around the world do tend to be women, actually. And quite often their stories are not told, or they don't have the ability to actually find the best platform. And while juggling various things quite often, not to say that men don't, but I think there is a level playing field there, which there's still a lot of work to be done. So bringing more women and taking them higher up the ladder, or having more gender inclusivity in terms of not discriminating based on sex or gender, or not trying to sort of say, well, you can't actually sell on to me because you come from a certain area, or you have a different view on what gender should be. Those should not be the reason why you select or why you choose to work with someone, or how you could basically help them to increase their trade. So while gender equality in the UN has a number of different areas, and that includes education and lots of different things, we focus on the angle on basically trying to support economic empowerment and cross-border trade, really. So those are the areas that we really focus on. The next area, which I suppose mentioned already, which is the visibility aspect, which I thought was sort of at the core of a lot of issues. And that links very closely to SDG 12, which is actually responsible production and consumption. And what is interesting is it's not just responsible production, it is responsible consumption. And I think that those are the two areas that one has to think about very clearly. You can't just sort of point a finger and say that the producers have got to do it right, but then as a consumer, we take no responsibility. It just sort of falls back again. And I think that's something that we'll come back to as well further down in the presentation. But I think the reason why we focused on looking at getting a platform and using technology to bring these stories to life is really to connect those consumers who would love to know these stories and would actually, engage and make the difference or make the change. That's you and me, basically. If we didn't have access, we wouldn't be able to know that they were there. So that's on two sides of the equation, production and consumption. At the same time, the production angle, we're talking about social impact. We have, for example, socks from a factory in Guatemala where the entire village has been empowered. There have been more than 2,000 families over there with children who now go to school, and the people are employed and they bring home a fair income, a fair wage, or a living wage in that case. And they work on much higher levels of the industry as compared to maybe the lowest levels where many people are just sort of sewing small pieces of sort of on the sort of just the shoulders together or the buttons. In this case, they've actually been given training and they are now empowered to go further up the ladder. So we're very, very pleased to actually have worked with this particular factory and to see the amazing impact that they're having. They're a small factory, but the impact they're having is really, really, really large. And then thirdly, climate action. I mean, I think we can't close our eyes to it. And while we could do our little bits with recycling and looking at how we would change our lifestyles, and I know that a lot of us have stopped taking takeaways and we would like to use our own cups. I know with the whole COVID situation, this has actually gone completely out of sync. And I was just walking my dog the other day and literally saw a whole bunch of masks lying on the floor. And this is something that I think we need to consciously think about. While we're trying to, of course, get rid of this virus, we need to be responsible and we need to be able to ensure that the PPE that we use, just as a simple point out there today, we dispose it carefully. That, A, you're spreading the virus, B, it's highly environmentally unfriendly. So I think those are just very simple points. But at the same time, climate action is obviously a much, much bigger debate and discussion. And in terms of our work, we work very closely with upcycled or recycling, or working with producers who want to actually look at creating innovative products that are that bring together aspects of new fibers or new technology. And we've actually made some connections for some people as well. So it's not that necessarily everybody has a finished product, but quite often it's about making those collaborations and connections so that we do try and have an impact on climate action. And that actually brings me back to the very last point of this particular SDG angle that we are focusing on, and that is really about partnerships with the goals. And as I said a minute ago, basically you can't do everything yourself, and it's not necessarily possible. So collaborating, finding good partners, and being able to connect and kind of reach a much bigger good, if you like, is definitely out there for us. So in many ways, SDG 17 is actually the most critical, because while we want to have gender equality and while we want to have responsible production and consumption, if we don't have the right partners, it'll be very difficult for us to really achieve any of those. So I've been talking to you a little bit theoretically till now, right? In terms of what the ethos is, what we do, what drove us to some extent. And now what I want to do is to just give you, and obviously I could speak about all our wonderful brands, and they are growing by the day, but I've just picked up a few to give you an example of what we mean. So when we talk about gender inclusivity and SDG 5 that we spoke about a minute ago, this is an example of a product and an artist that we work with very, very closely. And the whole idea was to sort of support her, which is that she is an artist and she does not want charity. She is looking to really, really trade and use her skill and her passion to make a living, just like all of us over here. And she doesn't want a handout. She actually wants to sell her art. She wants people to admire it, and she wants to be appreciated for it. And one of the things that we did was we worked with her. Actually, I met her back in 2000, trying to remember now, 2007 or 8 probably. And since then we've had an amazing relation, and she then looked at her beautiful art, and she has these mixed media as well as oils on canvas. But then we looked at a few products and said, well, how can we actually take this to the masses, but at the same time not lose the value of what you're doing? And that sort of was how Scarves That Speak actually was born. And you see on the screen on the right hand side, there's a beautiful hand-rolled silk scarf which depicts one of her paintings, and this particular one is on a coffee picker. And these were all printed in limited edition, but they are of the highest quality, and as a result she was able to reach a different target market, but at the same time kind of use the money that comes to her to build and to kind of grow with using, to kind of continue with her art, and at the same time work with us to offer even more and look at what other things. So it wasn't just about making postcards and selling them, it was about actually creating value. And the thing that's really interesting over there when we talk about Scarves That Speak is that there's a little QR code on that scarf in that painting, and the QR code actually takes you back to her story. And that is what is so amazing, because as her story grows, the scarf actually grows with you and becomes a part of your life, but is sort of speaking, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's just one little example of sort of SDG 5 and how we're having an impact. And we actually document a lot of this. We recently, in fact, in the very beginning, we started 2.5 years ago, it was very much about depicting it through stories and pictures. And like everyone else, we wanted to become more tangible in our measuring and our impact and assessing. And now we actually have an impact measurement tool, which is still evolving, but it's amazing because we can actually see we can guide every artisan brand through the process, and they can see their impact and we can see our collective impact. The next one that I want to talk about is about this absolutely stunning jewelry. In fact, I'm actually wearing some of them. This is from a brand and organization called Eden. And what Eden do, as you can see over there, is that they support, basically they rescue and restore, and in fact reach out and make a huge difference to the lives of individuals who've been trafficked across 5 countries in Asia. And it's a massive project, massive program, and they've grown. They're a charity, they're non-profit, but then they started they have an angle which is basically looking at how could these women reskill, and some of them will reskill in different ways, but there was definitely an outlet of looking at jewelry and looking at, many of them were very passionate about it, and they have an in-house designer, and they work very closely with these women to support them in their skills development and earn an income. And the jewelry they make, I mean, they're really stunning, gorgeous pieces, which are very wearable across the world. So in fact, Eden's jewelry, I mean, for us was an absolute, it just fit with the mandate, and the work they did, in fact, supported so many different aspects and areas. Not only was it gender, but it was also about the responsible production and consumption that I spoke to you about. Then coming on to actually I'm wearing one of their scarves as well. This is from the lovely Haspe Maya Moderno, which is from Guatemala. And they work on a variety. Their collection is actually made up completely of upcycled products. And this has to do with these gorgeous hand-woven Haspe materials, which are basically hand-woven vintage Guatemalan fabrics, which they've been rescuing from different parts of Guatemala. And actually every different design or weave has a different story and is linked to a different time and era. So it's really amazing. But then what they've done is actually they've brought that out and said, we want to protect and we want to safeguard our heritage, but at the same time, we know that people aren't going to all wear skirts the way that, these were originally worn. So let's kind of take them and then rescue them and refresh them, renew them into products that we could wear. So this is actually what we call an infinity scarf. It's a bit like a snood, but it has this amazing little button, and it's very it has it's, you know, you can wear it. It's completely gender neutral. It doesn't matter. Like, children can wear it as well, and it's cotton. And at the same time, they collaborated with a local factory that takes a lot of the denim waste. You know, when you manufacture jeans, you have a lot of offcuts and you have a lot of waste that comes out of it. Now, normally this is either thrown away, disposed, or, well, it's recycled sometimes, but not quite often. We don't really know exactly where it's going. Now, this particular factory decided to take this mill, and they were a textile mill to start with, and they started bringing this raw material in and spinning it back, decomposing it, and then spinning it back into yarn, and knitting or weaving it back into fabric, and thereby creating this gorgeous collection of absolutely really amazing, unique bales, because every bale was slightly different from the previous one of fabric. And in this particular instance, as you can see, the brand Haspe collaborated with the New Denim Project, which is basically this particular mill, and the gorgeous top that Tina in the little picture on the left is wearing, in fact, has recycled denim jersey as the base, and then a kind of a panel, if you like, of the vintage textile. And all of these are really easy wear products, and they're just growing with their collections and their ideas. So it's really exciting to see the level of work and kind of the different areas of impact they have. So for example, 5, 12, 13, all three basically in this case, because they of course are working on impact at various levels. That brings me actually to 17 that we spoke about. Now, when I said partnerships, how do we do it? And this is entirely eventually something that, you know, I think we all have to think about ourselves and see how this works for us and what would make sense, I mean, for us to collaborate. It's not about just going and partnering with absolutely everybody and absolutely everything. That does take a lot of time. But there's a lot of opportunity out there. And some of the things that we've done is to identify, first of all, of course, brands and artisans, because obviously that's our kind of core partnership, if you like. And we've got a 3-step sort of impact assessment process put in place now, which supports them. And this has evolved over time for us as well. And, you know, I have to say that we were quite overwhelmed at the very beginning to think about how could we actually make all these different elements or factors, how could we measure them, how could we actually see the change that we wanted to see. But it is evolving, and the great thing is that people are getting more and more and more interested and more passionate and conscious about things and want to ask questions, which is just amazing. At the same time, it's not just at the micro level. So I have been speaking at the micro level at the moment, where we're talking about the brands we work with, or the mills, or the stories that we're talking about. But at the same time, you know, at the very macro level with intergovernmental organizations or governmental organizations, there is a huge interest and at the same time need for understanding, if you like, at the levels of the United Nations, the WTO, government agencies, corporations, multinationals. And while I know the trend is to just say that, you know, multinationals may not really, you know, profit is the shareholders and profit is the biggest thing, I think it's a little bit unfair to just put everyone in the same basket, because there are quite a few who are in fact interested in looking at how to change from shareholders to stakeholders. And that's actually something that I mentioned a couple of weeks back as well to someone, saying that, you know, this whole idea that it's only about shareholders doesn't really work anymore. It's got to be about stakeholders. It's got to be about all of us. And if you don't have a stake in it, you know, and that goes beyond just monetary shares. So at the level of various organizations, we have been recognized as a partner, and we've been invited to voice our opinions and to talk about what is needed and what we see is happening and how perhaps we might be able to drive change. We do participate in various things, and I was very fortunate and honored to be invited to a couple of different events at very high levels in Davos, Geneva, New York, Paris is just an example. And I think one of the key things is to understand that, you know, who is our target? What are we about? We're not just about sort of saying we are another platform and we're just doing e-commerce. No, we're not. We're actually focused on enabling impact, on change, on trying to ensure that everyone who comes to the platform becomes someone, not just because they like the product and they buy it, but they actually take something back more than that, and they use it in their lives to make a slight difference in whatever it is that they're doing. So we do actively encourage brands to get in touch with us. We also have a lot of discussions and debates with, and I do say debates because we don't always agree on everything, but that's, I think, the beauty of this at the end of the day, because there is no straight answer. If there was, I think we would have all reached our targets and we'd all have, been in this amazingly environmentally beautiful world, which today, unfortunately, there's so much of kind of catching up to do still. So going to the next step, it's pretty much sort of, what can I do? It's not just about what's out there, what is someone else doing, what can I do? And I guess as a consumer, when I think of myself, or when any of us think, we think, well, at the end of the day, we want beautiful, unique products. But if it's so complicated and hard to get, and if I can't access it, you might just go for something else. So, can I get it at my fingertips if I do want to make a change and start thinking about it? The next question over here, and by no means are these like all the questions on earth. Obviously, there are many more that might be. And these are just sort of a snapshot of the kind of consumer dilemmas that we come across as well when we interact with our consumers. And I guess as consumers ourselves, we see this every day. So, for example, can I be sure that the producer is paid fair and ethically? Just the other day, my youngest son was in fact wearing something, and he actually said to me that, well, where did this come from? And that was actually very interesting, because in fact, he was wearing this beautiful t-shirt, which was in fact made by one of the brands on our platform. And she's an artist in North London, and her products, I actually could tell him the whole story. And he was just like, wow, I'm going to go out there and, tell my friend when we're playing that this picture of this beautiful illustration of the cat on the thing actually comes from this pet, and it was made over here. And I was like, well, at the age of 5, if you can, if you are interested in that, then that's the way to go. I think that's exactly it. It needs to be something that we think about without thinking, rather than making it such a big deal that, we've got to be sustainable. Well, actually, just start thinking of the questions that would be important to you, right? Is it easy to know where the product was made, and what is the story behind it? And I kind of put that question out there because I'm not quite sure as to how much people look at your made-in labels. And I suppose I would definitely suggest everyone out there right now, you should look at your whatever you're wearing and turn it around and see if you have a made-in label. And I'm not quite sure whether there is a way to find this out right now, but if there isn't, that's absolutely fine. You can keep that answer to yourself. But quite often, you will see there is no made-in label. You will see that you will find the fabric care, you will find the fiber content, but you won't necessarily see the made-in label. And that is because, at least in the EU, and I am aware that we have several countries over here, and I haven't been following the chat very closely as yet, but I will put the chat function and the Q&A on as well in a bit. But I know that definitely a lot of, at least in the EU, it's not mandatory, it's not legally required for you to have the made-in label. So while you do need to have fiber content and the wash care, you do not need to have made-in. And that kind of already blocks a bit of transparency there. And you definitely don't know quite often where beyond that it's coming from. So even when you look at a garment and you look at a made-in label, it's often the country or the place where it's been sewn together. It definitely does not tell you anything about the fabric or the yarn or the cotton or the silk or any of the raw materials further down the chain. And that is one of the biggest issues as well today, I think, that people are beginning to discuss. But I suppose when people say lack of transparency, you need to go all the way down the chain to be able to really be ethically trading. So I think that is something that bothers me definitely. How do I know the environmental impact of my product? I mean, how many of us know the processes involved with every single item that we use every day? We don't, right? So I often think that it should be the responsibility of the retailer or the producer to provide you with this information, because under consumer law in most countries, you have the right to know. But the problem is that you don't know that you should know, and you don't ask that question. So I think quite often it's not about doing it just because, it's about making the right choice and doing it right from start. And I think the environmental impact angle is, one is at the production level, but you can definitely have an impact on how you consume it, in the sense that, how do you wash it? How do you wear it? How do you, do you put it in the dryer? Do you put it on high temperature? Those are all the things that have become more and more important. And I think those are areas that I suppose I definitely started thinking about when I started questioning some of the things. I thought, well, actually, we just don't question many of these things. We just get on with life. And that is actually kind of become the norm. But especially with the lockdown, I suppose many of us have had a bit more time for reflection. I definitely have. And I've had more time to sit down and look at things. And at the same time, I've been able to actually talk to my children about it. So, I'm kind of thinking about how we could move forward with that. Then that brings me to the point about, as consumer, do I matter? And I think as a consumer, do I matter? Yes, of course you matter, because at the end of the day, this is all about us. It's not just about the production, as I mentioned. It's very much about how we move forward. And as a consumer, do I matter? How do I matter? And in my little way, what can I do? So in fact, we set out, there are lots of different ways of doing this, but because it's so complicated and confusing, we set out a 10-point sustainable shopping cheat sheet, which I won't go through all the 10 points right now, but you're very welcome to go online and we can send you the PDF, or I believe the Leeds University would be more than happy to send you a copy of it. A few points that we said that could really be something that you could question. Price is really an indicator. Sadly, it's not that everything that's priced high is sustainable, but definitely something that's priced super low that doesn't make sense, I would question it. So I think price is definitely one of the key areas that one could look at as an indicator. Another point, and I know there's a huge, and I don't want to be controversial over here, but the point that I'm trying to make over here, it's not just that if it's made in a location, it's good. You have to go beyond it. A product can be made ethically or unethically anywhere in the world. And I think that asking the right questions and just not going by a sales tag, ask a question beyond it. If it's made in the UK or if it's made in Europe, fair enough, that's great. But then does it still meet all the ethical conditions? And I suppose that's the question that I would definitely put, and say that just because it's made in a location does not necessarily mean that it's all ethical and perfectly made. So it is very confusing. There are lots of labels, there's lots of standards out there. And while there are many of these standards are also very expensive for small producers to put on, because everything costs money at the end of the day. So I've just listed a few out there as a snapshot. But if there's a small producer and they don't have a label on that product in terms of certification that you could recognize, what then, right? What do you do then? It's all great if you've got all the Okotex and GOTS and all of that, but that all costs money. But if you're a small artisan brand, what then? So then one of the things that I would say is ask questions. If you're a small brand, you're buying from a small brand, you're more likely to be able to access them or access the retailer or access the platform and ask the question. And I would ask as many questions as I would want to ask to be sure that what I'm getting is something that I am actually comfortable using. And some of the questions out there could be, who made it? Is it organic or is it not? There is no such thing as half organic to start with. Are they compliant with regulations? Are the dyes safe? Why would you not worry about what touches your skin the whole day? You should be. If you're concerned about the ingredients that you eat every day, you should definitely be concerned about things that touch your skin the whole time, 24/7, right? So I would definitely ask for my own safety and definitely for the safety of those who are actually making it. And I suppose if one of the sort of very simple points is, if there is no background, if nobody wants to give you any information, I wouldn't buy it, I guess. And it probably isn't that safe. It might be, but there's a reason why someone isn't giving you, or they could honestly say, well, I can find it out for you. I'm so sorry, I don't know it. And that's already a conversation. It is really always our choice. It really, really is. And as long as we're willing to look away, we're just going to drive this whole situation that is continuously happening today. And I think it's not just about the countries or localities. It's very, very much about very close to home about what you wear. Does it have an impact? Are those dyes safe, as I said? And, is it having an impact on the baby that you're buying the product for? I mean, there are so many regulations, but are they being met? Is it safe? I would ask all those questions. If I'm concerned about the food that I'm putting down every single day, I really, really would say. And the reason I keep talking about the food industry is because I think that the food industry has done this. Asking questions makes a huge difference. And the food industry can do it. I'm sure our fashion and textile industry can. The food industry has got so many ingredients and they've been pushed for it. And they've done it so well that today, the majority of things you buy consciously knowing what you're buying. Well, whether you read it or not is different, but it is there for you. And I think the textile industry, it has the responsibility to do it. And we really, really should be asking those questions as consumers. So in a nutshell, I would say, because we're also going to be running out of time, is buy less, buy responsibly, love it, cherish it, and make it last. Because if you love something and you cherish something, you're going to want to make it last. You're going to love that pair of jeans that you've had forever. Well, if I still get into it. But the thing is that you want those things to last because you love them. And that's exactly what we want. We want people to have that come back. You want to have it for years to come and hopefully pass it down generations as well. And basically, we're always open. I'm always open for any questions. Anybody who's interested in sustainability wants to talk to us, either for collaborations, to sell, to buy, to just have a chat. More than happy. And of course, if you want to stay informed, just a little plug there, do subscribe, and then you will be able to stay in touch with us very, very often. We only kind of write to you twice a month. But again, if you want to just get in touch with us individually, social@inclusivetrade.com is the email address to get in touch with us. And of course, if you want to just get in touch with me, I'm Rupa@inclusivetrade.com. I am more and more than happy to actually have an individual conversation with any one of you. And that's basically what I'd love for you to take back today is let's all just become a part of the solution. And while that might seem like a massive ask, I think if we all just thought about one little thing that we would do right now, after we finish this call, that would be a great start. That's 300 of us, or however many, I think almost close to 200 of us there, who could make a difference. So thank you very much for having me and for listening to what I had to say. And hopefully, I hope we could have triggered at least some questioning out there. Thank you very much. I think we have time for Q&A.
Thank you, Rupa. That was really fantastic. A really, really inspirational talk. And I'm sure everyone's absolutely blown away by all that information that you gave. I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. I was so excited about you being here, so I'll just let you know who I am. So my name's Pamyu Sinha. I'm an associate professor in the School of Design at the University of Leeds, and my area of research interest is really sustainable fashion and especially waste management within sustainable fashion. So all that you had to say, obviously, really, really interested, and I can see from the questions that we've already gathered on the Q&A panel, there's an awful lot of interest there as well. So I think I did have some questions of my own, but I think there's 12 questions already and a very limited amount of space of time, so I'll get straight to the panelists' questions, and hopefully we'll get through most of them. So there's a couple of questions that are quite similar. So there's one from Seshadri Ramkumar and someone who's anonymous, but they have very kind of similar sort of questions regarding cost. How can we make sure that, how can we overcome the cost factor when we're looking at sustainable fashion? And how can we do that if we've got a small budget, or just how do we get around that? That's the first question.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, I think I'm off mute, right? Yeah. So yeah, thanks very much for the question. Thanks, Pamyu. So I'll take just that question first, and then I suppose we'll just move on with the other ones, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I agree with you. Cost is definitely a massive factor, but there's cost in every way, right? So one of the things that, if you think about the textile industry, some of the biggest costs are the raw materials. That, you know, if you're making a shirt, 60% of the cost, if you like, the FOB is indeed coming from the raw materials. And when you think about if you can reduce your cost over there, I think in the supply chain, when we talk about the supply chain of the right from cotton up to the absolute retail end, one of the things I would say is that the recycling angle, there is a certain reduction in cost available to you at that point. Yes, one of the key issues today is about looking at volumes, and I think volume sales do drive costs down, but there are two angles to that, and I'll just answer them very briefly. Obviously, again, happy to have this conversation in a much bigger way. One point is that if there are more consumers like us asking questions, you're going to get the big retailers and the big guys to start questioning those things and changing what, and they have massive impact, right? We're talking about the effect. You remember I mentioned about the effect they can have. The consequence of them changing something means we're changing mass majority of things, and there we come with huge impact, and as a result the cost will be driven down because we're talking about volume. On the second point, when we talk about small production or small, if you're talking about small brands or brands that would write much smaller minimum quantities, in that case, again, you are more likely to be anyway not that cost driven. You're talking about value driven. And when you talk about cost versus value, there is an equation obviously to be had. And I think it's a question of targeting and driving the value up and not being so cost driven in that sense when it comes to the smaller brands, definitely. But when it comes to the bigger industry, again, there is education, awareness, and definitely there are some big brands who are making massive changes in looking at changing entire production, going into being recycled or upcycled. And I think that will have a massive impact on reducing cost. So cost will come down. It's just that at the moment, it's that peak where we're kind of pushing down something which is not yet quite the norm.
Okay. The next question is, how do you remain positive that industries such as the fashion industry will become less environmentally damaging and more ethical and sustainable? It can seem like not enough people care or are willing to change. So how can we tackle this? Unfortunately, this is there's no name to this, but I think it's a good question.
It's a great question, actually. And I think it starts with ourselves. The fact that you're here asking that question is amazing. It just means that you do care and that we can change. We're at least 200 of us over here who can change, or 120 at the moment. But I think that definitely when you talk about I think awareness, visibility, it's very much about visibility. And I think a lot of people out there don't make the choices they would make because they're not aware. I can't tell you the number of people I've come across when I talk to them about the upcycled stuff and things, and they're like, oh, and it's fashionably beautiful. I'm like, yes, you don't have to wear something aesthetically bad just because it's ethical. Ethical does not equal to bad design. It doesn't. So I think that is something that is beginning to become more and more. But yes, it is a slow process. And I think awareness, information like this, having webinars and having more discussion. Social media is amazing. I mean, it's bad and good if you think of it. And I think social media can be used for good in this case, rally and lobby it there. And honestly, you'll have followers who will actually be talking about it, get people to wear the right things, and you will see change, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So another question, another anonymous. Does using natural fiber equal to more sustainability? Say, for instance, bamboo fiber, which is currently a more popular natural fiber, concerning the manufacture and then engineering process, would this cost be more environmentally costly?
Okay, so I'm not a textile engineer, so I'm going to refrain from giving you very tangible questions on that. But one thing that I would say is that just because something is natural does not necessarily mean that it's environmentally friendly. I think it's a question of how it's made and what are the environmental conditions in which it's being made. What is the offset to any kind of damage if there is one? And I think those are quite individual and very independently based to brands.
Yeah. Okay. A question from Karine Urrutia. Is the cotton farm that you had in one of the slides in Guatemala, they're questioning most of the old cotton farms became sugarcane and palm oil plantations. So are there still cotton farms left out there?
Well, the one that I showed you definitely exists. It's definitely there, and they're producing, and they are, in fact, they make natural brown cotton and natural green cotton as well.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's gone down 3 generations, so it's very much,
gosh.
it's a small plantation, but you are right, a lot of it has indeed closed down, and this lady who runs it is absolutely amazing.
Wonderful. Okay. Natasha Cutmore, when thinking about sustainability as a consumer, is it better to focus on something made locally, or is it better to buy something that has a positive impact on a community far away, but the item has traveled a long way to get to you? Dilemma, I know.
It's a massive dilemma. I really wish we could just sort of go into sort of Star Wars age or something, or Star Trek, and like just miraculously have it. Having said that, AI is absolutely amazing today, and technology that is coming up. So just because something is made far away doesn't necessarily mean that the traditional methods will continue where you're shipping goods around the world. So I would say keep an eye on AI and technology, because you will be surprised at stuff that you're going to get.
Yeah. Okay. Kimenju Edna Faye. I'm sorry if I've got the pronunciation wrong, but she's asked a question which I think you might find difficult to put really succinctly, but it may be something you put on your website if that's something.
I think it would be if there's a specific interest in anyone who is a brand or knows a brand who's interested in engaging with us, please write to me so that we can have a conversation, because it is a process.
Yeah.
And, it's an individual process that goes. We have a conversation with them.
Yeah. This one was about the impact assessment process. So again, that's going to be quite difficult to put quickly. Chelsea Christie, gosh, these questions are coming in really thick and fast. I can't keep up with them. Chelsea Christie, that's it. What types of fabrics are the most environmentally friendly? Again, I guess this is more of a textile sort of engineering kind of question. For example, which ones use the most water during their creation or dyeing process?
Well, I think a lot of us know how cotton is. Cotton is one of the most thirsty plants ever. So the whole conversation around cotton is a very sort of double-edged sword, if you like. So one has to think very carefully about the cost benefit, and I guess every country kind of has that as a massive point in their discussions at the moment.
Prabhuda Ganguli has asked a question that I actually was going to ask. So thank you. How do you identify your clients in various parts of the world? Where do you get them from?
So I think clients for us are kind of twofold. On the one hand, we have the supply side. On the other hand, we have the buyers or the market side. And the supply side, it's very much about targeting, first and foremost, with it started off with us kind of going out there and working on projects and having this massive network of people that we come across. So that was sort of the first set. But very often we engage with the associations, local governments, projects, actually loads of development projects out there, which are really not known enough. Like the Dutch government runs some amazing projects. The associations around like the garment manufacturers associations in different countries have really huge databases, and they're all looking to support their small brands and micro industry, if you like, to be able to export. So I think from the supply side of it, the answer is very much about collaborations and partnerships and networks, looking at existing networks and new networks. On the buyer's side of it, again, it's very much, we've got, the physical aspect of it was started very local in a sense of kind of talking to people and showcasing it at events. But also, again, it comes down to collaborations really, because we were invited to the WTO to present in Geneva. There were a lot of people who got to know us. And again, the whole thing with social media today, and we use social media a lot. Instagram, we're very, very active on Instagram. And there's something to be said about website engagement and the whole thing. I know SEO sounds like a kind of a bad word or a black art almost, but it is something that really does work. So I think it's very much about targeting people locally, as well as through, I would say, this kind of phygital concept, which is physical and digital, which is really growing today. And a lot of the targeting does happen twofold. It's not just online or offline.
Okay, Okay, there's quite an interesting one here from Ariel Rojas. So she's looking at the SDG 17 and partnerships, and her argument is thinking about it as the consumers being part of this partnership. How are you going to incorporate one of the largest stakeholders yet, the consumers? So is it through the social media and marketing investments as you were describing, or do you have any other forms of engagement with the
So consumers actually did, in fact, thank you for that question, Ariel. In fact, consumers have been the very foremost in how we started out, in fact. So while we, of course, online, we are very sort of promoting suppliers, it started off actually with us having small mentoring groups on a hub and spoke approach, which basically meant small groups of either consumers, mentors, and producers coming together, having conversations, coming together and sharing ideas and asking each other. We had consumers saying what they wanted. We had suppliers. It sort of started about 6-7 years ago in this format, which was very much about sort of hub and spokes around the world. And when we talk about, when I say around the world, it's because of kind of the work that I've done, which has kind of made local a very sort of relative concept. It's local when I'm there, and I've actually spent so much time in Myanmar, so much time in Ethiopia, so much time in Guatemala, or so much time in Tajikistan. All of that is actually local at that point. So in fact, you bring together these local hubs of trust and conversation, and then connect it to the bigger whole, if you like, of other groups of trust. And as a result, bringing these amazing groups of trust together, because at the end of the day, trust is the biggest thing, right? So if you can get trust on one side and trust on the other side, and then connect that, that's actually where you get really honest conversations, and sometimes some pretty aggressive debates as well.
It's always good to have a debate, though.
It totally is, I would say. You get some of the best things out of that.
Okay. So there's a few questions that looking really at your how you think about things. So I don't know if you can say it quickly given the time. One is about what are your thoughts on greenwashing? So that's from Yalda Yazalu, who actually I remember her from one of my classes. Sylvia Goddard, looking about slow versus fast fashion, and how do you tackle and weigh up the problems or the way that they operate. Another one from Emily Barker about the laws that are in place at the moment to manage how fashion is sold. So the type of labeling, the type of regulations that are going on within the industry, or rather not going on within the industry. So what are your thoughts on mandatory labeling for lots of various elements of clothing? So those are three sort of, your thoughts on those.
Yeah, so I think I'll start with I think I'll go with the regulatory one first, just because I could probably answer that in a very sort of simplistic manner, because obviously we're not in charge of the regulations yet. But I'd say that in two parts. First and foremost, I think information is key, right? If you as a consumer or I as a consumer want to make the choice, I need to know the information. So absolutely, having more information. What do I think of that? I think it's great. I think information should be out there. After having the information, if I still continue to buy it, then that is a different story, right? It sort of goes down to like, you buy crisps, right? We all know crisps are not great. We all know chocolates. I'm not suggesting the crisp industry and chocolate industry are going to shut down. Far from it, right? But you've got to know what's in there, but you still buy it. So the thing is that I think information should be made available. So absolutely, I would be 100% for that. When it comes to talking about mandatory labeling, so this kind of is related to the mandatory labeling. At the moment, made-in labels are not mandatory in the EU. But again, when you talk about regulations, it's very nationalistic, or it's very sort of regional, or very sort of, based in a specific location. So when you talk about regulations, you can talk about the UK, or you could talk about the US, or you could talk about Japan, or you could talk about any other country. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all these regulations will be equal, right? So as a result, today, those are not equal. Today, we have some really big laws on the kind of dyes stuff that you're allowed to use in the EU. You're not allowed to use a whole bunch of dyes. And there is a massive regulation on that called the REACH regulation. But Does that apply in the US? No. So the question is that, when you're talking about regulations, it's got to be about like, which country are you talking about, and what kind of regulations are we asking for in addition? Because some countries do have directives where they do want to have more information out there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite a local thing in that sense, and it has to be lobbied, if you like, locally as well. Coming to, I think you mentioned slow versus fast fashion, right? Yeah. And consumption, full stop. And I think I started off with saying that, didn't I? I said, yes, stop consuming. I'm sure all our wardrobes have enough stuff to kind of be passed on for 4 generations and will still be fine. But that only works if the stuff you've bought in the first place is good quality and you've invested in good stuff. I mean, I know that my grandmother used to sew things from, other fabrics that were already in the house. And I grew up wearing these amazing stylized dresses that she made. And they were the best in the, neighborhood, just because she made them out of fabrics that were existing, like saris that she had or fabrics that she had, and she reused them to make these amazing things. So yes, absolutely, but it starts with investing in good stuff to start with, right? If you're going to buy something that's, I always say this, and I'm sure a lot of people have, a t-shirt cannot cost less than a cup of coffee. It just is not possible, okay? If you look at the supply chain, it's just not possible. So if you say that you want to buy something for £2 or £1, then you're going to get exactly the outcome of buying something for £1. And yes, you will have to keep consuming, because that's exactly the point. You will have to keep buying again and again and again, and at some stage you will spend £100 buying the same thing over and over again. Instead, go out there and buy the right thing for starters and ask the right questions. So when it comes to fast versus slow, I don't believe there is really a distinction to be made there. It's very much about the questions to ask, and the decisions and the choices are in your hands. Ask the questions, buy what you think is going to last, and cherish it, like I said. When you cherish something, you don't want to lose it.
Okay. I think the very last one was the
there was something on greenwashing. Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely be aware of greenwashing. I know it's a thing and it's out there, and people say it's conscious, it's organic, it's partly organic. I'm sorry, but how can something be partly organic or partly vegan? You wouldn't believe that something was partly vegan, would you, as a consumer when you're eating something? Same way, there is no such thing as partly ethical. What is a partly ethical? There is no such thing, right? So, I think we as consumers have a lot of responsibility, actually a lot of power in our hands to change really the direction in which this industry is going. And as I said, if the food industry could do it, I see no reason why the clothing industry can't do it. We just have to get together and start asking those questions and start making the changes ourselves. You go to a coffee shop and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to accept that. They're going to feed that back to management. If there are 100 people who do that in a day, they will feed back to management, and management will make a change on that particular thing, because otherwise they're not going to sell, right? So I absolutely think it's very much in our hands. And while it is a responsibility to provide authentic and truthful information, we all know that, whether today it's social media, today it's, through videos, in the past it might have been an advertising thing that was sort of, spread on banners because someone had the money to spend that kind of money to do it. You're going to have people shouting from the top of the rooftop. It's a question of what do you want to listen to and what choices do you make?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Rupa. I'm going to call it a day for the questions. I'm sure there's loads that I've missed, but there were just so many coming in really thick and fast. So thank you. I want to.
You're very welcome. And if I might say that, the cheat sheet that we have, actually, I didn't even cover everything that's on it, obviously, because but it's out there, and I think that might be quite helpful for people to have as a checklist.
That would be great. And I think I have seen a couple of people asking for your email. So I know that you gave it out earlier.
I have, yes.
That could go with your cheat sheet.
Yes, you're very welcome to contact me.
Yeah. So if people get hold of that cheat sheet, then they can do that.
Yes.
So I'm just going to kind of come to an end, really. I'd like to first of all say thank you very much to Rupa. Thank you very much to the Alumni Office for organising this. I'd just like to remind you that this session has been recorded, so it will be available to you in a couple of days. I believe that was on the chat. And there's a feedback form that you'll find when you've come to the end, so when we sign off and say bye-bye, there'll be a feedback form. So if you could please fill that in, that would really help us with our next alumni networking talk. So I think that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
It's
very
great
much,
to meet
everyone.
you. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.